behind every struggle, there's a story, and every story deserves to be heard. This is the Your Life Matters Show podcast. Your hosts are Steve Hodgson and licensed psychotherapist Dr. Eric L. Davis.
Tonight's episode is titled, Losing the Weight, Finding Yourself, and Losing Each Other. There's a moment, after everything changes, when you stop and look at who you used to be. The weight, the struggle, the quiet battles no one else could see. And then, something shifts. Discipline replaces doubt. Hope replaces frustration. And slowly, the weight begins to fall away. You feel different. You look different. For the first time in a long time. You are different. But transformation doesn't just change the person in the mirror. It changes routines, conversations, even the way two people see each other. And sometimes, it reveals things that were always there, just hidden beneath the surface. The confidence you fought for, the identity you've built. What happens when the person you've become no longer fits the life you had? Is weight loss breaking relationships or revealing the truth about them? Tonight we hold a deeper conversation about identity, growth, and what it really means when one person changes. Here are your hosts.
Well, howdy, and welcome back to another exciting episode of the Your Life Matters Show podcast. I'm your host, Steve Hodgson. I'm here with the man who's about to help us unpack not just weight loss, but everything that comes with it, Dr. Eric L. Davis. And Dr. Davis said for some people, that's a big package of luggage for some people to unpack. Yeah, there's a lot going on with that. And, folks, when I say an exciting episode, when Dr. Davis and I first discussed this topic, we were both like, huh?
Yeah.
Really? And then started to realize that this is really taking place. So I want to get into it, but again, before I do, before we start the episode, I implore you to take a few minutes, listen to our sponsor, Waypost Counseling. As you know, mental health is something we take seriously. And, especially here on the show. And Dr. Davis has even devoted his life to helping others. Okay, people that are struggling with mental health issues. They could be addiction, depression, anger, anxiety, abuse, couples counseling, gambling addiction. I keep going, okay? But I sound like a rambling ad. Okay, the team at Waypost Counseling can help you with the difficulties you're facing either in their office in Indianapolis, Indiana, or right from your own home. So remember, you can use your computer and meet with a therapist inside the privacy of your own home just by using your computer or laptop. And you'll be so glad that you did and take that first step. So I ask you, please just give a quick listen.
Maybe you didn't expect to hear this today, but if you're watching right now, this might be for you. Life can feel heavy sometimes, not overwhelming all at once, just quietly difficult. You're feeling stress, anxiety, thoughts that don't seem to slow down. You are trying as hard as you can, but your body wants that next hit. Or maybe it's your relationship, where conversations feel harder, and the connection that you once experienced just doesn't feel the same anymore. You tell yourself, I am not going to be so abusive the next time. Or maybe it's something more private, like gambling, something that started small, but now it's affecting more than you ever expected. And maybe part of you keeps thinking, I should be able to handle this on my own. But you don't have to. At Waypost Counseling, support is available for individuals, for couples, and for those struggling with addiction. And you can access it from the privacy of your own home. Through secure online sessions, you can talk to someone who understands without pressure, without judgment. It's just a space to be heard. Something inside you is saying, maybe it's time. Trust that feeling. Contact Waypost Counseling today. Call 317-762-0904 or dial 317-659-0179. Also, you can visit waypostcounseling.com for more information. Because your life matters, and everyone deserves support along the way. Make the call today.
So today we're talking about something that doesn't get discussed nearly enough.
We often hear about the success stories, people losing weight, gaining confidence, transforming their lives.
And you see, and those stories are so incredible. In fact, we've even had a few guests on the show recently who have done just that. Completely changed their lives through hard work, discipline, and with most people, that's a big word, discipline and resilience.
But what we don't always talk about is what happens after the transformation. Because for some people, losing the weight doesn't just change how they look, it changes how they see themselves and how they relate to others.
And sometimes that includes their closest relationships, marriages, long-term partners, even family dynamics.
Yeah. When one person undergoes a major identity shift, whether it be physically, emotionally, psychologically, it can disrupt the balance of a relationship in ways people don't expect.
Now, you see, we're seeing more and more of this today, whether it's through lifestyle changes, bariatric surgery, and even medications like Ozempic and Mounjaro.
The transformation can be powerful, but it can also raise questions about identity, connection, and compatibility.
So today we're going to ask a deeper question. When one person changes, what happens to the relationship? Does it adapt and grow stronger, or does it begin to break down? And maybe even more importantly, is the change itself causing the strain, or is it revealing something that was already there? Now, this is going to be a really powerful conversation, and one that I think a lot of people may be quietly experiencing right now. So we want you to take a deeper look. And I tell people this isn't happening with everybody, but the number of people that are divorcing right now due to this happening that's had either the bariatric surgery or weight loss is incredible. I mean, right now the numbers are staggering on that. So let me ask you, Dr. Davis, when we talk about significant weight loss, whether it's through lifestyle changes, surgery, medications, what kind of psychological changes typically happen alongside the physical transformation?
So a lot of times when there's, significant weight loss, it can affect a lot more than appearance, because people can experience increased confidence, improved self-esteem, et cetera. But sometimes people feel empowered and other times they feel exposed, emotionally exposed because the transformation changes long-standing patterns they built their identity around. So it can change their view of their self in significant ways.
Well, yeah, I think, a lot of people look at it. I'm sorry, I was going to say, look at me, I'm not the fat pig anymore. But look at me, I'm not the overweight slob, that I was presenting myself as. Look at me now, much more svelte and,
Yeah.
I I find it incredible. I'll talk more about that later. We used the word identity a few times already. Now, what does that actually mean from a psychological standpoint? Because when someone says, "I don't feel the same," I don't feel like I'm the same person anymore. Okay, after weight loss. I mean, what does that identity change mean?
So identity is essentially the story we tell ourselves about who we are.
Mhm.
It's the culmination of all of the stories or the story in general. So a lot of times people may no longer emotionally connect with the version of themselves that they lived as before. Many times for years or decades, their routines change, their confidence can change, social experiences can change, and even the way people treat them changes. So that can create a very real sense of psychological disorientation where someone feels caught between who they are or were and who they're becoming.
You know, it's strange, and I really, I said I'm going to try not to put myself into it a little bit, okay? But last night I even got a phone call from a friend of mine in Indiana, and I guess and I didn't have to prompt him. He actually watched the podcast himself that was running, on
Yeah.
Thursday evening. And one of the things he said, My. He's an older gentleman, former minister. So my. He says, you lost a ton of weight. He says, I've heard you telling me over the phone, but he says, I've actually seen it now. And it's like, yeah, I have. But, you know, I think it's affected my relationship on a positive level,
Mhm.
where I have a lot more energy about myself to do things. I can do stuff without being winded as much. We can go
Yeah.
walk along around the flea market without me having to stop and sit down someplace. It's actually something that's good. So, how does that identity shift affect the relationship, especially when one partner is changing in a major way and the other one isn't?
So relationships are built around, certain emotional patterns, dynamics, routines, etc. And when one person's emotional patterns or routines or role changes, the other roles are affected. And so we actually see a relationship shift a lot of times, like in when someone's, say, one person's struggling with drinking and they enter recovery and stop, you know, really both people are in recovery because those dynamics are changing. And even the loved ones, even though they're not the one stopping drinking or something, it changes the role they play in that relationship. So
Right.
I think that's a big part of it.
You know, I guess how these people look at it to their spouse or a significant other, um, I looked at it as a positive.
Well, but sometimes that's a good point. But sometimes even positive growth can create instability,
Hmm.
and shake up how things were. So we always hope for a positive effect, but even positive effects can change relationships.
See, and I'll use the word fat pig because I'm describing myself. But, I looked at, even with Jen, see, they're not saying, why is she with that fat pig for? You
Stop
know,
talking about my friend.
yeah, exactly. But you get what I'm saying. People are very judgmental. I mean,
Hmm.
people look at people and they judge. I mean, we talked about this a few weeks ago in
Hmm.
the episode just aired actually this past week, well, from recording time here, where we talking about when you see people in Walmart
Hmm.
and we all see the overweight person driving around that little cart,
Yeah.
the scooter in the store, and you think to yourself, they're just lazy,
Hmm.
but we don't know there's other medical
Yeah,
problems.
they may have
And
they may
yeah,
have a thyroid issue that, I
right,
mean, we have no idea what's
right.
making that
But
happen. And
people are just, but they're cruel.
Mhm.
I mean, I've seen people, treat people cruelly because of that. And, I looked at it as a positive thing that I was losing weight. Forget about, I mean, actually, I took Mounjaro to the people that are still taking it, but mine
Yeah,
was not prescribed to me to lose weight. Mine was prescribed to me for what it's meant for, which was to help my diabetes. And
yeah.
I got to tell you, it's phenomenal. My diabetes, I was taking 212 units a day of insulin. I take less than
Wow.
30 a day if I take any at
Wow,
all. If I take any at all
that's amazing.
in a day. Yeah. So, I mean, that's, I knew that was too much. So, why are we seeing cases where increased confidence, people are setting new boundaries? How does that, I mean, besides the obvious, how does that impact existing relationships?
Well, sometimes people who, if they previously struggled with self-worth, they begin recognizing unhealthy dynamics they once tolerated.
Hmm.
So an increased confidence may lead them to communicate more directly, prioritize needs differently. These things can be healthy, but if a relationship depends on unhealthy dynamics or imbalance, new boundaries can create tension very quickly.
Hmm.
So, it's navigating. Relationships are all about navigating change, and it's relationships are fluid. They're never just, hey, this is how we are always. It's both people grow, both people age, both, people go through things, and it's just navigating all of those dynamics together. which sometimes is easy, sometimes really difficult.
The big question, and you've heard me say this on podcasts many times, folks, sorry. But, the day before we're going to record, the evening before, I usually, I try not to do it prior to that, but I do go and I look the topic up on YouTube that we're about to discuss. I don't look for topics on YouTube, but when we're
Mhm.
about to do a show, I'm just
Yeah.
curious of what's out there. And I think people are missing the really big question, or they touch very lightly on it. And the question is, and I'm going to ask it, are these transformations, well, let me rephrase that. Is the transformation creating relationship problems, or are they just revealing issues that were already there?
I think more often than not, it's revealing issues more than
Mhm.
creating new ones. It's major life changes tend to magnify the strength and weaknesses that are already present in a relationship. So weight loss itself is rarely the sole cause of a relationship being broken. More often the transformation the person goes through exposes communication problems, insecurities, emotional disconnection, etc. So a lot of times these are things that already existed on some level beneath the surface, and then
Right. And,
the transformation brings them to fruition.
I have a good friend of mine I reconnected with 25 years ago from Westport.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, that I used to hang out with, a lot. And then we just lost track of each other, and 25 years later, he shows up here in Ocala, Florida, where I'm at. And, we got together and we talk a lot. And he had bariatric surgery.
Yeah.
Okay. And he was with his current wife, you know, before the surgery and now. And, when Jen and I went out to dinner with them, they're still, the bond is as strong as ever.
Yeah.
And, his attitude is just the same. I mean, he's just now has a lot more energy to keep doing, especially as we've gotten older. I mean, we're 25 years older.
Yeah.
I mean, that has a lot to do with it. And he's found this newfound strength and she loves it, and they get along great with each other. And it, like it said, I think, they didn't have problems prior to that.
Yeah.
And if you don't have problems, they're
Mhm.
not going to suddenly materialize unless the guy suddenly thinks, he's going through a midlife crisis, and
Yeah.
and buying the Ferrari and stuff like that. Yeah. That's
That'd
there.
be a
So
nice midlife crisis to have.
yes, exactly. Well, it'd be nice to have the money to afford the
Yeah,
midlife crisis
exactly.
like that. Okay. So what are some of the early signs that a couple might be drifting apart during a major life change?
Well, number one is reduced communication, you know, um, emotional distance, increased defensiveness is another one, growing resentment, decreased intimacy, a lot of the typical warning signs of a relationship breaking down. But sometimes couples stop talking because they're afraid of hurting each other, you know, but silence often creates more distance than talking does. So it's always a balancing act.
What about, and just was thinking about, so what about a guy who, and I can only tell it from a man's point of view, folks, okay? Because that's all my brain thinks of. But someone that's really, okay, let's say really likes somebody all along,
Mhm.
but yeah, she's out of my league. Look at me. She's out of my league. And then all of a sudden loses the weight
Mhm.
and has that new, and they may get along really, really great with their spouse and stuff. But now all of a sudden it's like, with men that starts to go through their head,
Mhm.
hey, you know what? I might have a chance with that.
Yeah.
And I don't want to make it sound like it's an object, but with that person is what I
Yeah.
meant to say. Why does that happen? Why does that suddenly happen? Is it self-esteem?
It could be, it's hard to say why, I would say it happens because that was probably a desire that the person had before,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and then they just maybe the transformation gives them, well, this is my reason to be free, or
Right.
whatever. But the thing is, I think you said it best. If it's a relationship, if it's a healthy relationship that I'm in for the right reasons, really the transformation shouldn't change a lot. Um, it should only have a positive effect on the
Right.
person's physical health. I mean, really. Um, so I really think that I would say that person probably wasn't the right person in that relationship in the first place. Like if they don't want to be in the relationship, they're in the wrong relationship.
So someone that, let's say couples that want to stay together for that matter,
Yeah.
okay, what are some of the ways that they could navigate the transformation together instead of doing it, as two separate entities?
Well, one is staying emotionally connected. You know, um, as my family just went through one
Hmm.
of the most tragic things, and thank God Adelie's okay. I mean, Adelie is okay and she's home smiling from ear to ear and life is great. But during that time, during tragedy or a big change, everybody kind of starts coping in their own way. And that's okay, but what's most important is that we communicate, that we're staying connected. And this is just, if any of my family members are watching, honestly, I'm so proud of my family because my whole life, anytime a tragedy has struck, we band together. We really do. We band together, we do the best we can, we talk, laugh together, cry together, whatever we have to do. And I think that's really, um, just staying connected is makes a big difference.
I always think back to the connection. People are a community. And,
Hmm.
in the future here, I've been working on getting a couple of people on the show that go out and help things in the community.
Yeah.
Um, but as a community, I always look back at 9/11. Okay. And
Yeah.
I was living in Indiana when 9/11 happened, but I was a New Yorker. Okay. I was born and
Hmm.
raised in New York. And the one thing that I heard that surprised so many people was like, look at the lines outside the hospital that people were lining up to give blood. Okay,
Hmm.
well, lines like two
Yeah.
or three blocks away. It's like, look, everybody's, helping everybody. We're trying to get out of the
Hmm.
towers. People are helping each other. It's like, this is New York, the city that people don't care. No, they do.
Yeah.
In the times of a crisis, your community or a family, you should be getting together.
Do you think New Yorkers just care more roughly?
Yeah, I mean they're so busy with their own things, but when it becomes something that everybody needs to pay attention to,
Yeah.
I think they are. And I don't want to comment on mayor and stuff in New York, but I mean you're starting to see the backlash starting, with some of the policies from New Yorkers. When they had enough, New Yorkers get together and
Hmm.
they do different things. And people are the same way, with your family. When this tragedy, my family goes on, like yours is much closer than mine, but mine isn't far apart from each other. They just really don't communicate until there's something to get together and communicate
Hmm.
with.
Yeah.
Okay. But when they do, then all of a sudden, move. It's like nothing happened, in between. We're all there. But other than that, we're each going about our own lives. And maybe that's a New York thing,
Yeah.
because from the East Coast there. So I don't know. So let me ask you, when someone goes through a major transformation like this, is it possible they're not just changing physically, but actually grieving who they used to be?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, they can grieve the old version of themselves even while feeling proud of their progress. You know, um,
I don't know if I would
person,
grieve with my old self that was 40 pounds heavy.
yeah, you were like, good riddance.
Yeah, goodbye. See ya. Take
But
the
that
clothes with you, okay?
the old identity may have existed through major life experiences, relationships, coping mechanisms, emotional survival. So even unhealthy identities can feel emotionally familiar and safe. So there are some aspects of that can happen, but letting go of old identities can create grief or confusion. definitely can affect how we feel.
Well, think about, I guess that'd probably be my next question then. Okay, we feeling one way inside, but the outside world starts treating us a lot different.
Yeah.
Okay, we talked about with the Walmart situations.
Mhm.
Now all of a sudden, the person that lost, say, 150 pounds with bariatric surgery, it's got to feel much different because people are treating them.
Mhm.
It's not like, when you go and sit on an airplane and that person's going to go sit in the middle seat. You're like, oh my
Yeah.
God, okay. When the bigger person's going to sit there. Whereas now, when they sit there, nobody thinks anything of it.
Mhm.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's got to affect them inside, that disconnect somehow.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that I've known a few people that lost significant amount of weight, and I remember one, she was telling me that it kind of made her upset. Like part of her transition, she was extremely overweight. She had bariatric surgery, lost tons of weight, and that she was telling me one time that like she felt like guys were, obviously like guys would approach her more often, and that it kind of hurt her feelings, and there was a part of her that really grieved that, like, I can't believe somebody's treating me completely differently because of how I look. I'm the same person,
Mhm.
and so there's both sides of that. I mean, there's definite positive changes, but it also can sometimes make things that may not have been obvious before painfully obvious, you
Obvious
know?
now, yeah. Well, it's funny because Spencer from SB Mowing is one of the shows that I watch, and he's got a shirt that I was telling Jen, I really want to buy. I'm sexy and I mow it.
I like that. I like that.
Yeah,
What
so
a
did I.
great.
I really like it. It's like every time I'm going to go out and mow, I'm going to wear this shirt. Yeah, I'm sexy and I mow. But that's, it's that feeling that you get, like you say, and I can see that when you're going to start seeing people treat you differently, and
Mhm.
you're going to start to realize too, even on the positive side, how people weren't treating you before.
Right. Yeah. And that's what she was saying was it just she noticed a lot more shallowness that
Hmm.
she'd ever seen before, because it became painfully evident.
Yeah, it really becomes obvious. Yeah. So let me ask you then, do people ever feel pressure to live up to that new appearance or identity?
Absolutely. And that pressure can be extremely intense. There can be fear of gaining the weight back, disappointing others, or losing the attention. So yeah, there's a lot of pressure to keep up with the change.
Now, a very interesting thought. Okay, so let's say you have two overweight people and are trying to lose weight. I mean, I know I remember going through this when I used to smoke. My
Mhm.
ex-wife, okay, where I stopped and she didn't stop.
Yeah.
Okay, you know, how does that affect the partner who didn't change during all this weight loss?
Well, it could be, they may feel like they're not good enough, so they may internalize that, or well, it didn't work for me because I'm not as strong, or they could start
Mhm.
internalizing those things when really it's everybody's different. I mean, literally our
Mhm.
body is different. I
Yep.
mean, so there there could be other reasons, but um, I also see instances where the other partner internalizes, basically like kind of looks at that as, oh, well, you're not willing to try as hard as me,
Right.
or, those sorts of dynamics.
Well, they're going to start to feel left behind,
Yeah.
really, at that
Hmm.
point. And it
Definitely.
wasn't done intentionally, as it says, but I mean, I could see that being something that's pretty common.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, he's gone on, he's lost all this weight because we're talking about weight loss, and I haven't.
Yeah.
Okay,
Or it's, am I good enough? Am I, did this not happen because I'm not good enough, not smart?
Mhm.
Do I not care enough? Do they not love me enough? I mean, there's all those,
Right.
questions.
Well, guilt, I mean, plays
Hmm.
role. I
Yeah.
mean, losing weight, that they feel like they've outgrown their other partner. Well, that dynamic is actually going to change
Yeah.
because if you have two people that are overweight, and I don't want to use the word lazy because it's not the word lazy, but energetically, they
Yeah.
don't have as much energy as the other person, and now all of a sudden one of these spouses or partners in the relationship is now up and moving around
Right.
and doing something, they're going to feel that that dynamic is changing, that,
Hmm.
and that's why they're gonna outgrow the partner, and we can psychologically sabotage that, could we not?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah,
Totally sabotage it.
right. It's like, he's gonna leave me anyway.
Hmm.
Look at me, you know.
Yeah.
He's lost all that weight and I'm, still overweight. So
There,
now what?
there's an old saying where I've always like I don't know where it came from, but I think it's true, that big changes either bring people together or tear them apart. A
Mhm.
lot of times.
So we talk about communications. Okay, how do we stop that communication from breaking down?
Just staying connected. I think that, simply staying connected is the best way. Um, and just being honest and supportive and loving. I mean, that's the thing is when a family member or a loved one or anybody is willing to welcome good Lord, welcome us into their journey, whatever that is. I mean, that's a beautiful thing.
Hmm.
Like I always tell clients, like, thank you for allowing me to play a role in your recovery journey. You don't
Right?
have to let me do that. I appreciate, you know what I mean? Like, so I think a lot of times we forget what a gift that can be, or how open someone's being when they welcome us in. So I guess I'm just
Yeah, a
saying,
lot of times people, I find myself doing it a lot in my own relationship where you just expect that something is understood.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know, it's like sometimes, when you hear, and this isn't in my own case, but I've heard in other cases where, you never say thank you for that dinner. That was really, really good
yeah.
stuff, but it's expected. Well, and I've been amongst friends have done it, but all the meals that you make are delicious.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah, but every once in a while it's nice to hear it.
yeah.
And that's communication, and we need to keep that connection and
Hmm.
communication open. So I want to talk about something that people may hesitate to say out loud, but I'm
Okay.
going to ask the question anyway. How much does physical attraction really influence long-term stability?
So physical attraction matters more than people like to admit, but emotional connection, trust, safety, respect, communication, they matter far more long term. So attraction can open the door to connection, but emotional intimacy is usually what sustains a relationship through life changes and challenges. So it's basically, I think a good way of saying that is if I can make sure I stay emotionally connected, that's going to play the largest role in the long term, because physicality changes, you
Well,
know.
you just said that with the increased attraction and attention that people getting from others, after weight loss, does that create temptation or is it just awareness?
If both, I think it depends on the person. I could see where that, could be temptation, but I can also see where if they're in the right relationship and happy, it's just awareness of it.
There's probably a stupid question because, well, for most of us, we probably look at it as being stupid. But what about intimacy? Does it become more complicated after weight loss?
I mean, it could where maybe one person, um, feels like, well, now they look great and I don't, or
Hmm?
it just changes all the dynamics, and it can play out in all sorts of areas of a relationship, intimacy included.
Let me ask you, so how do we know if we're evolving in a healthy way versus, I guess, moving away from something that still has value?
Healthy growth increases self-awareness, integrity, empathy, emotional responsibility. Like if growth becomes driven primarily by ego, validation, impulsiveness, you know, that's probably not healthy transformation. So with healthy transformation, the question is not, have I changed? The question should be, am I becoming more grounded and emotionally healthy through this change?
And I think we basically have said this, and I think it's something we need to keep in mind about what happens when, one partner doesn't keep up, so to
Yeah.
speak, with our personal growth. People are different, and we
Yeah.
need to keep that in mind because it's probably very easy, to say, well, she doesn't want to put in the work.
Yeah.
You
Yeah. Or
know,
basically, blame someone for the situation, whether it's their fault or not, or
Mhm.
whether they can help it or not.
I used to even hear my own wife. It's like, well, but you're not going for the walk, or you're not going out doing the walk, or you're not doing the, there are other complications that person may be dealing with, like in
Yeah.
my case, the oxygen and stuff, or like we were just talking before we came on the air about my back,
Yeah.
killing me and stuff. There's certain reasons sometimes that restrict us from doing that, and we always got to remember when we're having that conversation to keep all that open in our head,
Yeah.
because otherwise we will drift apart. Now, if couples are going through this right now, what are some practical ways to stay connected?
So I think prioritize healthy habits, prioritize honest conversations, quality time together, emotional reassurance, shared goals. Couples also need to avoid making the transformation only about appearance.
Mhm.
Emotional connection has to remain the central thing.
Yeah, because life is going to change all over the place
Hmm.
for you. I mean, it really, really will change everywhere.
Yeah.
So, what are some of the warning signs that your relationship may not survive this?
I think if you're seeing, signs of an unhealthy struggle beforehand,
Hmm.
that may be a good warning sign. Um, yeah, I'd say that.
But
Anything
the
that's,
sad part is people aren't. There's a lot of people that don't realize, and just from like I said, from watching those shows the other night, they're just people that just don't realize that these problems were there
yeah,
all
yeah.
along.
I think a
And
lot of
now
times yeah, that's true.
either that or you hear the problems there, but you're thinking it's because of my weight.
Hmm. Yeah,
And then when you realize when you've lost the weight, it's not the weight, it's you,
yeah. Hmm.
and the way you deal in your relationship. So let me ask you then on the flip side of what we're just talking about, what are the signs a relationship is actually growing stronger?
Well, if you have greater honesty, more transparent communication, emotional closeness, the things that would show that any relationship is getting stronger.
Hmm.
Um, that's those are the indicators that things are moving in a healthy direction.
So here's the question, okay? People look for excuses all the time, okay? And
Yeah.
they want the easiest excuse. So do they mistake like personal growth as a reason to leave instead of that there was a deeper issue? Because we've been
Oh,
talking about the deeper issues. It's easy
yeah.
to just say, well, I've grown now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, sometimes, the growth simply gives people the courage to finally confront problems that were there in the first place. So that's one thing. And other times people may confuse like excitement, or external validation with true emotional clarity. So basically like I'm feeling a certain way, but if others don't agree, or if I don't get that constant validation, then I must be wrong. It's not because here's the thing, no relationship is hopeless. It's just getting relationships to a place where they can move forward. I mean, and sometimes that's easier than others.
Hmm. Now, two very interesting questions. Is transformation more about becoming someone new or finally becoming who you already were?
I think for a lot of people, it's a combination of both of those things.
Hmm.
Um, you know, growth uncovers parts of ourselves that were buried, under insecurity, fear, those types of things. But transformation also changes us through experience, responsibility, self-discovery, or showing us, like, hey, I can do this, like, hey, if I can do this, maybe I can do other stuff. I
Hmm.
mean, it really, it all depends on how a person internalizes that change, really.
It's how you're viewing this, what I mean, I viewed my weight loss as just okay, it's making me back to who I was,
Yeah,
before, and not that I was a different person before, but the things that I did, it allows me to do a lot of the things that I used to do before,
yeah.
and didn't have problems with. And I'm going to leave the biggest question
All
of
right.
all of it. When someone changes dramatically, should the relationship be expected to stay the same?
No, because no relationship stays the same over time. I
Hmm.
mean, that's just an impossibility. Healthy relationships evolve, and in healthy relationships, people evolve together. Um, so whether both people are willing to evolve together instead of expecting the relationship to remain frozen, that makes or breaks them. It's we have to expect that things change, and
Okay.
we're going to deal with the change together as best we can.
So let's light things up a little bit,
All
okay,
right.
and have a little bit of fun because we've gone into really serious. Yes, folks, it's that time again.
It's the lightning round.
Yes, it's the lightning round.
All
Now, I'm
right.
going to ask Dr. Davis a few quick questions. He will give us the first thought that comes to his mind.
Okay.
Well, the first thought based on the topic that comes to his mind. Okay, the first one. Confidence after weight loss, is it more empowering or more destabilizing for relationships?
It can be both.
Well, we're saying it's what it should be, but yeah, it could be both,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Is physical
We want
attraction
it to be empowering, but it could
right,
be both.
exactly, yeah. Is physical attraction more important in long-term relationships than people like to admit?
Absolutely.
Now, can personal growth ever be selfish?
Yes.
Yeah. Do people outgrow relationships or stop working on them?
Sometimes both.
Hmm. I think people get complacent in
Yeah.
their relationships. Biggest mistake couples make during major life changes.
Not communicating.
One word. What's the most important trait to survive change in a relationship?
Adaptability.
Big word. Is it harder to change yourself or to accept your partner changing?
Accept change. Accept someone else changing.
Someone else changing, yeah.
I think so.
That's actually a good question. Does increased attention from others after weight loss complicate relationships?
It can.
True or false, most relationships can survive major transformations if both people are willing.
True.
Yeah. And the final one, does transformation bring people together or expose how far apart they actually already were?
It it exposes and capitalizes on what was already there.
Hmm. Now, as I said a few weeks ago, I met up with my friend Rob, uh, and I'll have to say, if he had passed me, and this is really the truth, if he had passed me in the street,
Yeah.
okay, before we actually met in person, I would not have recognized him. I mean,
Really?
yeah, I know
Yeah.
we've aged, okay. I can age someone, okay, but even sitting there across from dinner from him, the first 5 or 10 minutes, my brain was putting his face to the face I was seeing in front of me.
Yeah.
Because, if you had asked me to describe Rob, and Rob was a big guy. I mean, he really was. He was,
Yeah.
big dude. He's a truck driver and everything. He was a really nice guy, but and now to see him, so thin, I mean, he looks great. Okay,
Yeah.
don't get me wrong. I mean, he looks fantastic. But that really changed. I mean, he looks fantastic, and thank God I can say he feels fantastic. Okay,
Yeah.
that's a great thing. So, what happens psychologically when even your past and how people remember you no longer matches who you are today?
I mean, that throws things for a loop. I mean, it really does. And so you have to navigate that and embrace the change. I mean, really, you have to embrace the change and go with it. I mean, I think that's one of the best things you can do.
I mean, he's had to, I mean, I can't be the only person, and he said this years ago, the surgery, but I'm not the only person that I'm sure has looked at him and said, "Oh my God." Okay,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
lack of a better word so we don't get censored on YouTube. Um, wow. I mean, that was the word to me. Believe it or not, I think my initial wow was when I saw his picture on Facebook.
Yeah.
When I saw wow, it was like, wow.
Yeah.
I mean, and then I started to think because he was living for a while. Well, he still lives right over, 5, 10 minutes away from me. But
Yeah.
he was, I was like, have I seen him and walked past him and not had any clue who he was? Because even myself, with, the skinhead, as I call it here, he probably wouldn't recognize me either.
Yeah.
So I, I've been saving this one for the end here. So someone who's
Okay.
listening right now who feel like they're changing, whether it be physically, emotionally, mentally, and their relationship feels different because of it.
Mm.
What would you want them to understand?
Well, that change doesn't necessarily mean that something's wrong. You know, growth often creates it's like shakes us up emotionally before we gain clarity. So the important thing is to slow down, communicate honestly, avoid making fear-based decisions, during periods of major transformation. So it's, when there's a major transition taking place, one of the best things that we can do is just kind of slow down a little bit so that we don't make any rash decisions or, I mean, I think that creating a little bit of time is good. A little extra time. Let me just say it
All
that
right, a
way.
little extra time, yeah. I want to sum up the episode with one question.
Okay.
And it's probably the biggest question that we've asked and answered today. But we should ask one more time. Because people need to hear this. When one person changes, is the goal of the relationship to stay the same or to evolve together?
Healthy relationships evolve. So it's to evolve together. Trying to keep a relationship exactly the same while life happens and time goes on and people grow and change is absolutely unrealistic. I mean, there's,
Mhm.
and if you think about it, you know, um, a lot of times in a marriage, it's like, well, you're different than the person I first met. It's like,
Mhm.
well, I hope so, because we met how many years ago, or whatever. But I mean, honestly, it's a lot of times we can really overlook things by not, acknowledging good changes that happen too. So it's it's really just expect things to change and expect to do the best you can with them together, and that's the best you can hope for.
I always joked with Jen when she said that. It's like, yeah, but when I met you, I weighed 180 pounds. Okay.
Yeah.
And I was like, I was 60 pounds more. Look what you did to me. Joking around. But, you know, I think this is very important because, how the show came about to us was the increase in divorce rate
Yeah.
because of GLP-1 drugs. And now that there's even something out that I think it's in Australia or something. They're testing a different GLP-1 drug that has something else that's even more effective. I've been reading about
Wow.
it, that they've been doing it with lab rats and stuff. But again, what I want people to know, and I'm not going to pull out celebrities or anything like that. We've all seen the celebrities who I think lost really too much weight
Oh yeah.
and
Yeah.
look a lot different. Okay. Our society, yes, it's healthier to be, a little less heavy. Okay, but we don't
But
need
too
to
thin is
follow.
unhealthy also,
Right, exactly. And remember the main thing is these GLP-1 drugs were not designed for weight loss.
Yeah.
That was a side effect of it. They were designed to help diabetic patients.
Yeah.
And boy, am I the poster child for that because it helped me tremendously. I mean, my sugar never goes up.
Let me ask you this, Steve. Since you've, kind of gone through that,
Mhm.
Were there things that, were there any observations you took away from that in your own experience that you feel like would be helpful to others?
I know that number one of the things that anybody that's on these first off these GLP-1 drugs need to realize there are going to be some side effects from any
Okay.
drug that you take is going to have side
Yeah.
effects. Okay, and that might be like in my case, it was just some like loose bowel and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
we found ways around that. Number two, yeah, you find a new sense of energy and it's like really
Hmm.
great, but it's like now, okay, we're at noon today. Okay, we're recording this right now, but I haven't eaten anything yet today, and I've been
Yeah.
up for over 4 or 5 hours now. Am I hungry? No.
Yeah.
Okay, so you have to be aware of that too. And whereas I would sit down with a pizza and maybe give you a slice and eat the other seven myself, okay, after one or two, I'll give you an example. Last night we went to Bob Evans and
Hmm.
they have the two for $10 meals. Okay, that we went for, and we were driving back from Lowe's and we said, "Oh, let's go stop at something to eat." And I had three chicken strips. Okay, now usually with a couple of fries and stuff, and I think I had mac and cheese because I didn't want the coleslaw because it was awful to me
Yeah.
the time there. Um, I couldn't even eat more than like one and a half pieces. I left French fries, which is like a mortal sin.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, you change as a person. You start to be different. I've always been one. I joked with people. I don't flirt. Gents sometimes say, but they're going to take it as flirting. It's not. That's just who I am. I'm
Yeah.
just a fun person. I like to talk to people, like to have fun with them. I try not to cross a line or anything with them.
Yeah.
But I just like people. Young or old doesn't make a difference. I'm not age restrictive on that. But if you haven't done that before, okay, and you start to do that now, yeah, it's going to be looked at, okay, maybe, is the waitress or waiter giving you more attention because you lost that weight? I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't even look at that. In God's all honesty, when I sit at the table, when I'm in front of people, I don't even think about my weight. The only time I think of that if I feel my pants are too loose and they're going to fall down.
Yeah.
One of the things I said to someone the other day is be prepared, keep a knife or something close by because unless you got a lot of money, you're going to be buying a lot of belts or you're going to be making holes in the belts.
Yeah.
Okay. And every one of my belts have like 2 or 3 holes in them. And it's because I keep losing more weight and I have to make it tighter and tighter.
Yeah.
I sometimes stand up, when I wear my shorts in the house. I stand up and the shorts start to fall. And I got to tie that string even tighter. It's like realize one thing. If I can sum up anything, realize one thing. It's great to feel better about yourself. And when you feel better about yourself, I think you become a better partner
Yeah.
to the person that you're with. And look at it as a positive to that other partner than as a benefit to yourself. Because yes, you're feeling better and you're looking better, you got more energy, but think of what you're doing for your partner too.
Yeah.
You're not becoming a different person, you're becoming, and maybe that's it. And that's what I'm going to end with when I say this. You're not becoming a different person, you're becoming a better person.
Yeah.
You're still the same person. You're
Yep.
not different, you're just better.
Yeah.
So now, we talked a lot about transformation as something positive, and it is. But,
Oh,
transformation also brings uncertainty and sometimes difficult questions. Who am I now? Where am I going? And who's
yeah.
coming with me? And those aren't easy questions, but they're important ones.
Because at the end of the day, this isn't just about weight loss, it's about identity, growth, and connection.
And sometimes growth brings people closer together, and sometimes it reveals just how far apart they've become.
Yeah. But wherever you find yourself today, you're not alone in that journey, and your story, your growth, your life still matters.
Now, please remember to like, subscribe, and share this video to someone who may need to hear this important message. We're discussing. Leave us a comment. Okay.
Yeah.
It's a simple.
Talk to us.
Either one. Yeah. Right. We want to hear from you. Have you gone through this before?
Yeah.
Or do you know someone that's going through this?
Yeah.
I'd like to hear your take.
Yeah. Also, please visit our website at yourlifematterspodcast.com for more information on Steve and myself, as well as how to connect to us, purchase some merchandise, or even become a guest on a future podcast.
Now, I want to thank you so much for joining us this evening. God bless each and every one of you. And we want you truly to know the next time.
Never forget, your life matters. Take care, everybody.
Bless you.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Your Life Matters Show podcast. If today's conversation resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share the episode so more people can be part of these important conversations around mental health. And remember, your life matters. We hope to see you again next week.